Hi, it's great to be back with you all. Again, I'm Tovi Hussein, and we are going to start off this module with digging into the six circle model, which is what I call the be do paradigm. And the six circle model is this above and below the green line. This is what gives us a framework for exploring our beingness, our being versus our doing. And so below the green line are these concepts around relationships, identity, and information. What is that relational beingness that we bring as humans into the space? What supports our beingness is mindset. Our biases and beliefs live there, our equity lens, our capacity to hold social emotional learning and trauma responsive strategies. All those kinds of things go into the beingness and, if you will, the feeling tone of who we are. What's above the green line is this doing, the technical aspects, the structure, the processes. Our beingness is expressed in how we do. So policies, rules, instruction, curriculum, the design of things, all of that is the doing that reflects our being. When our being is not mindful, then our doing is generally not mindful. When our being is not inclusive, then our doing is not inclusive. So this model can serve as a guide, if you will, again, of the feeling tone and the expression of who you be and how you be to do what you do. The green line there is simply a reference of above and below the green line. And I have renamed the green line culture climate, because when we talk about culture climate in our schools and organizations, we talk very much about the feeling tone, the morale, how things are experienced. So just think of that as culture climate, that above and below the green line, both are necessary to have a positive culture climate. And your beingness fuels your doing. That's what's important to take away. So when we go into exploring the castle wheel, which I know by now is just really review by the time you got into this module, I simply want to highlight how the wheel, again, emphasizes self. It begins with self at the top of the wheel. And when we explore the skills of the SEL wheel, they're absolutely critical for the skills that we need for discussing equity and inclusion in our classrooms and in our schools. This is a slide that I designed from the article that was put out by the Greater Good Science Center, the 3 SEL skills you need to discuss race in classrooms. With this particular model here, I've taken it a step further to name that, yes, we need the skills of self-awareness, self-management, and social awareness, but what are the distinct skills of beingness that go into each of those buckets that then relate into having us be able to do? Because remember, it's all about the self-awareness and self-management to be able to be more culturally aware, to be more social aware. All those areas that go into the external relational capacity that we bring from our internal self. So in self-awareness, we anchor to that awaring framework again, where we're unpacking that awareness of what is arising right now. When we're meditating, that is what I'm inviting us to anchor to. What's happening inside of us? So awareing and meditation fuel that self-awareness. Sometimes journaling, that internal processing through writing out our thoughts, feelings, and emotions support that self-awareness that fuels self-reflection. And then again, there's the sacred pause, where we take that opportunity to stop, breathe, notice, reflect, and then respond. And then recognizing bias, our own biases, to recognize those begins with self-awareness. You becoming aware of your bias is the way that you know that they're present. And then we have self-management. The awareness of the emotions and our body sensations. How are we able to manage what's happening in our bodies in the moment when we might be agitated or anxious or happy or excited? Being aware of our physical space and who we're inhabiting, if you will. Again, the sacred pause supports us in being more connected to the awareness of our emotions and bodily sensations. Because when we are disconnected from our breath, we lose that connection to our body. So taking that deep breath and that sacred pause moment allows you to notice, this is how I'm feeling. That management and that awareness are tightly intertwined. This also supports ways of being. Ways of being can be like a personality or a feeling tone. If someone says, you're feeling really peaceful, then your way of being might be peaceful in that moment. Generally, ways of being are pretty consistent and they're used as descriptors. So when we want to support our ways of being, we might slow down our breathing to bring a greater sense of calmness. And then there's interrupting the bias. So if self-awareness is around recognizing our bias, self-management is that moment that we're actually interrupting it. We're taking that moment to stop from acting on the bias that is arising in us. And oftentimes, again, we can't prevent the bias from rising up in us. It's so deeply ingrained, but is absolutely within our full control, especially when we're mindful that we can interrupt the bias by not acting on it. And then this third bucket, this third skill to definitely support discussing equity and inclusion and being more inclusive is our social awareness, because the social awareness is the external piece, right, of how we're bringing our self-awareness and self-management out into the world. Is through our social awareness. And so we might plan out our conversations. How does that go into what is our intention for this conversation? What are a few things I'm going to say? When we plan out a conversation, it allows us to be better listeners. We can be more present because we've already kind of formulated how we want to show up and what we want to say. There's also sentence stems, and we're going to cover some of those sentence stems in our time together. But sentence stems that I'm saying that are more inclusive and more connected. Those sentence stems also connect to the boundary stems. And how are we setting boundaries for ourselves in these conversations? How are we making those explicit? Again, connecting to ways of being and connecting to interrupting bias. And the final bullet point there of genuinely honoring others, that to me is the point of all of this when it relates to equity and inclusion. That our social awareness is so great that we can genuinely honor others, and genuinely enough that they feel that they're being honored, even if we make a misstep, even if we don't get it exactly right. Again, there's a genuine honoring that is being attempted and is being felt and is genuinely being expressed. How do we get here? Because we use the sacred pause. A key tool for equity and inclusion and mindfulness is the sacred pause. Stop, breathe, notice, and reflect. All of that is the being. All of that is below the green line. Remember, the doing is the responding. The doing is the acting on everything that's happened below. So we use the sacred pause so that we do all four parts that happen inside of us before we do that fifth thing of actually responding and going into doing. Sometimes we don't have that much time to sit and have a long meditation when we're in the moment, or to sit and have a long meditation as we are, in the midst of the conversation or are hustling from one meeting to the next. So I invite you to just simply practice with this micro practice, the 3 center check-in or the 3 breath check-in. And this practice allows you to have a cycle of 3 inhales and 3 exhales. So 1 cycle of each. And on the first breath, we do the inhale noticing what's happening in our bodies. And so that exhale. The second breath, we do the inhale, we notice what's happening in our feelings, and then we exhale. The third breath, we notice what we're thinking, and then we exhale. I like to add a fourth breath because the fourth breath for me takes in all the information from the first three breaths and then it informs, that's what I should say, that it informs my skillful response. So when I take in all the information from these three breaths, I do that fourth breath that informs my skillful response, and then I feel ready to move forward skillfully. So let's just practice this 3-breath check-in or this 3-center check-in. Again, you can call it either one, whatever feels best for you. First inhale, just noticing what I'm feeling in my body and exhaling. Second inhale, noticing what I'm feeling in my feelings, maybe even labeling it and exhaling. Third inhale, noticing what I'm thinking, exhale. Fourth inhale. What do I want to do with this information? How will I move forward? Exhale. Because sometimes that's all the time you have to respond more inclusively and more mindfully.